Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Tuesdays are great days for podcasts because, well, that's when the buff comes out, and that's a great thing. And the reason it's a great thing is we have the world's greatest listeners. They have made us a global top 10% podcast, which is an awesome thing. And as usual, they and you can reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, hit subscribe or like or whatever it is on your podcast app that lets us know that you know we are doing what we should be doing. Remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And buried somewhere in the show notes is a link where you can buy me a coffee, and that would be a wonderful thing here in this, well, what continues to be a long, bleak winter, making its way towards spring. We should be at least halfway between winter and spring now, which is really a great thing because we are past the Groundhog Day we did either last week or a couple weeks ago. But later this week is Valentine's Day. I think it's going to be Saturday. I don't know. We record these things in advance, and you never know when they're going to drop. But either way, Valentine's Day is February 14th. It is another in the great slog of candy-based holidays that fill out our calendar. We have, I think of this as like the candy holiday season. It goes from Halloween to at least to Easter, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter. I don't know if they have a special candy for President's Day or if they have special candy for, I guess you can get red, white, and blue candies for things like Memorial Day and 4th of July. Maybe the season goes all year. I don't have any idea, but this is one of them. And Valentine's Day has become a highly candy-centric day. It seems one might have forgotten what these days are all about, with all the focus on candy and cards and costumes and presents and whatnot. But today we're going to look at Valentine's Day. It has been around in some realization for centuries, if not millennia. Now, on a personal note, for me, it's not been around that long. But if I round to the nearest century, it's been around at least for a century. I remember doing all manner of Valentine's Day things back in grade school in the early 1970s. Everybody was assigned the responsibility to bring in a shoebox, and what we did is we decorated these things with construction paper. There's always lots of construction paper, it seems like, in elementary school. Red and white and pink, and you'd cut out hearts, I guess, or you could cut out, I don't know what, I guess we did that. We covered them with paper, and then we put little hearts on them. And, the girls always did a great job. And I and my friends and I did a poor job because we just weren't very good with scissors. And, it's kind of hard to draw like, footballs and, I don't know, monster trucks and put them on your Valentine's Day mailbox, I guess is what it was. But we did red and white and pink hearts. Hearts are pretty easy to do. You fold the paper in half, you cut out half a heart, and you get a whole heart. And that's, when you unfold it, that's a great thing. And then you were supposed to go out and get Valentines. I guess you go to the store and get them. Maybe you still do that. I think some people probably actually made them, but most of us, you could get a glob of Valentines for $1 or something like that. And we put our names on them, and we make one per student. We got a list of students from the teacher, and we were all supposed to make sure that we had one for each person so nobody got left out. And that's, looking at the time, I remember thinking that was, who wants to, because as a little kid, okay, I thought at the time, who wants to give one to that kid? And that was the problem, is because that kid didn't have any friends, or there was a problem. And so I guess if you're going to do this thing, you got to go in and make it fair, because, when you're 7, that can be excruciating to not be included in that. So, and then there was a special time, I don't know, maybe on the day itself or the day before, we would walk around and drop the Valentines into everybody's little box. And, some people had these boxes that were, real works of art, and some of us they were really bad. And I don't even know why we did this sort of thing for Valentine's Day. Everybody got hearts, and then everybody got one from everybody else, and then there was candy involved, and then we went home. It was all very scripted, and we were 7 or 8 years old, and it was awkward and weird and kind of forced. But I always wonder why. What is it we were exactly useful? I guess at least back then we had those cheap and chalky candy hearts with those pithy sayings on them, like "Be mine." Those were always fun, I guess. You could, and now I guess they have them and they have say obscene things on them and stuff like that. So it's not quite as cheeky as it was. Anyway, we did that back in the day, and that's been decades now that has been going on, I think, and it probably still goes on in some capacity there. And now it's even more extreme. You can get Valentines that have candy built into them, right? You get a Valentine, it's actually a little box that has, it's filled with M&Ms or something like that. And some of the parents go hog wild on this stuff, and they make sure that everybody gets, I don't know if it's a badge of honor thing or they're just being nice. I think actually a lot of them, they're just being nice. They like to share these things, and they think it was fun for them when they were kids, and they want to do it for their kids. So you can get celebrity Valentines. I think you can get ones with like Taylor Swift with little candy hearts, or with, doing that little thing where you make your hands into a heart. Pop stars and sports celebrities. I'm sure I bet if you can think it up, it exists. It's still kind of a popularity contest because some people get more Valentines than others. And that kind of makes it not a real good thing to do in a school setting, but there's a lot of candy involved, and that was kind of fun. But until you get older, it's kind of a wacky ritual. I think the elementary school Valentine's Day was kind of odd. In high school and in college, sometimes you would send a Valentine to a crush of yours or your significant other at the time. Or if you were lucky, you might get one from, well, see, this could be either lucky or unlucky. Okay? You might get a Valentine from somebody that you weren't expecting, I guess is the thing. And if this was a Valentine from somebody you did not expect, but you were glad, then that was good. But if it was somebody you didn't expect and it was bad, then that would be bad. And if you were with a significant other, but you got a Valentine from somebody else, then that really complicates things. Then you have love triangles, and it's just really complicated. All in all, it's a very awkward thing. It produces lots of anxiety and stress, certainly in young people. But I guess it's all part of, in a sense, it's a part of growing up and learning about love. And that's a thing that has been going on, like I said, for centuries. There was an old Roman festival that took place in mid-February, and it was called Lupercalia. Luper coming from lupus, meaning wolf, having something to do with wolves, and Romulus and Remus being nursed by a she-wolf in a cave. I mean, there's the Roman myth, right? So there's something with that. And February is supposedly the month of renewal and cleansing. You're coming out of winter, right? And then you're coming into spring. And February is a month for that sort of thing. And Lupercalia was a festival. And it was, we read about it now, and what we read are things, I'm sure there were shenanigans, and I'm sure there were people that took it farther than it was officially supposed to go. You can look up this stuff, and you can find things of people doing highly depraved things, and you can find people doing relatively innocent things, doing little delightful things even. But the Romans had this Lupercalia thing. And like I said, people ran around and they flirted and they did those sorts of things. But I don't think, some places have said like there were lotteries for choosing mates. I don't think that was really, I don't know, maybe that was a thing. That sounds like some sort of, soft horror tale that of some dystopia, but who knows? Maybe everybody thinks Rome was a dystopia anyway. They had Lupercalia, and there were some animal sacrifices apparently at some of those, because there were some coming of age things for young men, and they had sacrificed a goat or a dog or something. But this was all through the cult. This was part of the culture, okay? And that's how people can be. They can do those sorts of things. There are festivals. There have always been festivals, and there were ancient Roman festivals around middle February. Now, there were some saints named Valentine, and the church notes at least 3 of them, all martyrs. One was said to be a priest in Rome. Another one is attributed as being a bishop in Interamna, which is apparently now in modern Terni. I don't even know where these places are. I mean, you can look them up, right? Click the button in there. They'll show you where. Some places in central Italy. Both of these guys apparently were martyred in the second half of the 3rd century, so the late 200s. And they were said to be buried on the Flaminian Way. So around the turn of the millennia, well, when we go from the 3 digits to the 4-digit years, AD, you get that's the turn of the millennium, I guess I'll call it. Back in that time, what was known in antiquity as the Flaminian Gate of Rome, and is now known as the Porta del Popolo, was called the Gate of Saint Valentine, apparently after some small church that was named after one of those martyrs that was there. And like I said, there's not a lot of stuff on. There's not a lot of hard evidence on Saint Valentine, and that's part of the issue. There's a lot of I guess cultural history, but passed by word of mouth and legend and myth, I guess, and they all tend to mix together, maybe like a King Arthur kind of thing. Saint Valentine is said to have lived during the reign of Roman Emperor Claudius II. One account says that he was secretly marrying Christian couples, defying Claudius's ban on marriage of young men. Apparently, the emperor believed that unmarried men made for better soldiers. So Saint Valentine marrying a priest marrying Christian men took them out of the ranks of the highly efficient soldiers. Another story tells of Valentine restoring sight to a jailer's blind daughter, which led her whole family to convert to Christianity, and then the emperor consequently ordered Valentine's execution after he refused to renounce his faith. And soldiers beat him with clubs and beheaded him outside the Flaminian Gate on February 14th, 269. So that's the second half, second half of the 3rd century. So, and legend holds that before his death, he left a note for the girl he had healed, signing it "From your Valentine." And, we have legends about all sorts of things. And the point of the legend isn't that the legend necessarily is true. What matters about legends is that they reveal a truth. Okay. And these stories about Valentine are legendary. I'm sure they're based in some sort of truth, but they point to a bigger one. They emphasize his courage of faith and his beautiful outward expression of love for God and neighbor. So that's kind of a Valentine thing getting started. The third guy that I mentioned early on, apparently nobody knows much about him other than there was one. So that doesn't get much press. There was a Pope Valentine who was Pope for 40 days in the early 1800s, the early 800s, long ago. He got elected and then died 40 days later. Pope Gelasius I. You ever heard of him? Okay, Pope Gelasius I established Valentine's Day in 496. So, right almost at 500, he said, you know what, we're going to celebrate this feast day of Saint Valentine on February 14th, probably in response to this Roman Lupercalia festival on February 15th. So this is an example of one of these things. We're going to take this perhaps seedy Roman festival, and we're going to come up with a competing festival. We're going to call it St. Valentine's Day. But in 1969, due to lack of any real hard evidence, Pope St. Paul VI took the Valentine Day feast off of the universal liturgical calendar. Apparently, priests are still allowed to celebrate Mass in honor of that feast, but you can do that based on local customs and pastoral judgment. And it may be wise to do that, or may not be wise, depending upon where you are in how your culture celebrates Valentine. So the Valentine's Day feast has become highly secular. It is no longer as a big religious thing. Chaucer, yes, Geoffrey Chaucer of the Knight's Tale fame. Yeah, Jeff Chaucer, right? He notes in a poem he wrote called "The Parliament of Fowls" that medieval Europeans believed that birds began to pair up on February 14th for mating. So February 14th was a date for them to find a mate. And, you could say, well, medieval Europeans believed all sorts of things like groundhogs predicting weather. But, I, you know, sometimes it's fun to just have a story. All right. And it is okay. I think it's okay. Like with, for me, the big one is Santa Claus. I think it's okay to have a Santa Claus story because it reveals a great truth. And maybe believing that birds begin to pair up on February 14th, and therefore it's okay to take the chance to ask out the girl that you like. Well, maybe that's okay. So there's nothing really wrong with that. Of course, if you're, burning people at the stake, if they don't agree with you, then that's probably a bad thing. So there's a lot of legend and myth and unsubstantiated belief from that time. And we can poke fun at the silly, stupid medievals. They believed all sorts of silly things. Well, yes and no. Okay, we have our sorts of fun and silly and stupid things that we believe. What will the future say about us? It's worth asking the question. I say let them have what they had. They had a culture, they had their lives, and whether or not they thought the birds paired up on February 14th, it doesn't really matter a whole lot to me. Do you believe only in those things that are accompanied by some sort of certificate of authenticity? Or those things that you can actually touch and see and photograph and measure? Where's the fun in that? All right, come on. All right, why do you believe that the only way to believe is the way you believe? That's not a thing that you can measure. So let's let them have that. All right, let's let them have these fun, silly, superstitious things. They give life a little zest, and sometimes they result in great feasts and I don't know, good food, which is always a good thing. So regardless of all this stuff, the church does not teach that Valentine's Day is necessarily meant to celebrate romantic love, but rather it is to commemorate St. Valentine's life as a saint and a martyr. So his courage, compassion, and dedication to the church reminds Christians that true love reflects the love of God, patient, kind, temperate, selfless, and humble. Even though the modern celebration seems to emphasize, cards and chocolates and flowers, the saint's example shows that real love is sacrificial love, inspired by Christ. A line in the old marriage rite says, "Sacrifice is usually difficult and irksome. Only love can make it easy, and perfect love can actually make it a joy." So, how should we think about love? That's really the question here. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, on Saturday, you're going to have Valentine's Day. You're going to have to think about love, and it may require you actually buying a card or some chocolates or some flowers, or it may require you to do something of more substance. So the Greeks had lots of different words for love. Among them are three commonly used words, I think still today: philia, Eros, and Agape. And some of you have heard these words, I think. We've mentioned them on the podcast a number of times. Philia is a kind of love that means affectionate regard and friendship, usually between equal parties. Okay, so this is kind of a dispassionate, virtuous love, and it's often expressed as loyalty to friends, like brotherly love, or teammate love is the thing I always think about. When teammates express love for each other, hey, I love you, man. That's what they're saying. It is not a romantic love. It is a loyalty kind of brothers in arms kind of love. And it doesn't mean that women can have that. I think a lot of women have something like that. It's not quite the same, I think, with women as it is with men, but it's in the same ballpark. It is not. It's dispassionate, virtuous love. Okay, it's I would do anything for my friends, that kind of thing. Okay, and that's philia. And Valentine's Day is not really about that. Although I'll bet if you looked at it, you could find some cards for teammates or for brothers or for siblings or sisters. I bet that those things exist, and that's an opportunity to celebrate philia on Valentine's Day. Eros is what is most commonly, when people use the word love today, they are mostly meaning Eros, meaning mostly sexual passion. Plato talks about Eros and how it's initially felt for a person. With contemplation, it becomes an appreciation of the beauty within that person, and it may ultimately transcend particulars to become an appreciation of beauty itself. So for Plato, Eros can direct you toward Platonic love, which is love without physical attraction. Socrates argues in Plato's Symposium that Eros helps the soul recall its inherent knowledge of ideal beauty and spiritual truth. So the ideal form of youthful beauty arouses erotic desire, but also points toward higher spiritual ideals. But Eros is, in most cases in the current day, we are thinking of Eros as the spark that hits you, as the arrow that hits you from Cupid's bow. You see somebody, and it is or you get to know somebody, and it becomes it's a passionate. It's the passion. It is passionate love. That's Eros. Now, agape in a Christian context means especially unconditional love or charity, and it's the love of God for person or of person for God. And Aquinas defined this rather famously as practicing agape is to will the good of the other. Now, our good friend Dr. Mark Dice, who was on us on the show with us in episode 65, says that actually Aquinas says it is to will the good of the other as other. And a lot of people leave that off at the end. The important thing there is that we need to think of the other's good from the perspective of the other. So if you're practicing real love for neighbor or love for your child or for your spouse, you need to view that not as, well, this is what I think would be best for you. You need to really think what that person's good would be from their perspective. And that's a difficult thing because you really have to put yourself in their shoes. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. It is safe to say, regardless of how you think about philia and Eros and agape, that the modern take on St. Valentine's Day is mostly focused on Eros. What's interesting is that that's part of love, but it's certainly not the only part. It is a very important part, and it can be a very good part, although it actually can go astray very easily. But by itself, it's incomplete love. Eros can drive us toward agape as kind of in the direction that Plato mentions. Eros is how love feels. Agape is what love does. A 2023 article on love being a choice or a feeling by Simone Rizkala points out how these two components of love, this piece of Eros and how it feels, and agape and what it does, and how they fit together and how they work. Like I said, Eros is a feeling, and agape is a choice or an act. And some people might ask, they say, because there's a lot of discussion about agape being kind of a higher form of love, are we only called to live out the not fun part of love, the sacrificial agape part? Do we have, must we be just reason that triumphs over passion? Do we have to, in order to do this right, do we have to jettison the Eros piece? That seems kind of not very much fun. And the answer is no, I don't think you do. Eros and agape, I don't think are complementary. I think they are both components, and it's a little tricky. Eros is a feeling, like I said, and agape is a choice. Pope Benedict XVI talks about this idea as love as an action that we choose and control, and love as an emotion and a feeling that occurs despite our choosing. So Eros comes to us sometimes with no desire on our own, with no plan, and anybody who's been there will recognize that it can come from nowhere at unexpected times, and sometimes cause great joy, and other times cause tremendous problems. But Eros comes despite our choosing, and agape is love of an action that we choose to control. So Eros is neither planned nor willed. We are not angels or stoics. Okay, we are not just spirit, and we are not just body without feeling, like the Stoics might want us to be. We have bodies and emotions, and they both matter, and they matter, we can tell, because God put them there. The gift of Eros imposes itself on human beings. It's a gift that imposes itself on you, and we all know this. Cupid's arrow can overpower our reason and can be called a divine madness Indeed, this Eros is part of the enchantment and delight that I discussed back in episode 199. In contrast, agape fully engages your reason and your freedom. As manifestations of agape are actions taken for the good of the other, as other, independent, perhaps even in contrast with how we might be feeling at the time. So there's a feeling that comes to you. That's the Eros piece. And I don't want to say you have no control over that, but it really comes out of nowhere. That's not a thing that you can just sit around and create if you're not interested in that. I mean, something has to drive that. But agape is fully within our reason and our faculties. And oftentimes, the agape that you do may be contrary or even independent or even in opposition of how we might be feeling. To be fulfilled, love must be united in these two elements. And that's the trick. They have to align. Our modern culture promotes a love that is all Eros and no agape. This culture does not seem to be producing happiness or human flourishing. Just look at the outcomes of this. People are more miserable and lonely, depressed and anxious than ever. Sex trafficking runs rampant. Porn flows like water, and so on. But following natural law and moral teaching on agape can save us from these miseries. How does agape save us from this unchecked and unfettered Eros? Eros is an experiential sign of the ultimate fulfillment of all desires. That fulfillment being God himself. Pope Benedict says, love is indeed ecstasy, not in the sense of a moment of intoxication, but rather as a journey, an ongoing exodus out of the closed, inward-looking self toward its liberation through self-giving, and thus toward authentic self-discovery, and indeed the discovery of God. Whoever seeks to gain his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will preserve it. And that's from Luke chapter 17. So choosing agape leads to life in the fullest. Sacrificial love, in accordance with reason, is what keeps married people in love in Eros. You can't maintain the Eros without the agape. And the Eros will fade. That's a thing that happens. Everybody knows that you know, the natural spark can dwindle. And it is the agape, it is the sacrificial love that maintains the gift of the Eros. Erotic love is fed by agape love. Eros cannot be fully enjoyed without agape. Desire cannot be filled without sacrifice. We cannot command feelings of Eros at will. You cannot just make them happen. If so, it would kill off the gift that is Eros. But we can will that we make choices that generate romantic feelings. As rational creatures, our emotions are made to serve us, not to control us. If we seek just the emotion, if we seek just the Eros, then we make an idol out of the Eros, and it ceases to be an authentically divine gift. So, what does this choosing look like? How does agape look? What does love do? And the answer is found very simply in St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians in chapter 13. And I'm sure you've heard most of this, if not all. If I speak in human and angelic tongues, but do not have love, I am a resounding gong or a clashing cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and comprehend all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith so that as to move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away everything I own, if I hand my body over so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. Love is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interests. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. If there are prophecies, they will be brought to nothing. If tongues, they will cease. If knowledge, it will be brought to nothing. For we know partially, and we prophesy partially, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I used to talk as a child, think as a child, reason as a child. When I became a man, I put aside childish things. At present, we see indistinctly, as in a mirror, but then face to face. At present, I know partially, then I shall know fully, as I am fully known. So faith, hope, love remain, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Now, this reading, this chapter 13 is often done at weddings. Obviously, that's what you do, and it is one of the great expositions in the Western canon. This revelation of what love looks like, what agape looks like. This is part of the fuel that has led to flourishing in the West. And of course, if this is jettisoned, then there goes the fuel, and there goes our flourishing. So this is how willing the good of the other. This is how it looks like. Okay, willing the good of the other as other. This is what it looks like. This is what it does. This is the measuring stick. Now, I love this passage anyway. There's so many things in there, and I've talked before about different translations that have things that I like and I don't like. There's a couple places in here that are classic statements that we may hear in different translations. I think they sound better. I kind of wish I could mix them together. When I was a child, I used to talk as a child, think as a child. I think the old King James said, when I was a child, I spake as a child. And I love that past tense. And there's some great lessons there about growing up, jettisoning the way you used to do things. When you were little and you were dumb, you did little dumb things. And now you are a man, you are going to do the childish things. You're going to push them aside. And I always think that that's how you ought to grow up. Eventually, you need to grow up, and you need to address things fully. The other piece here is the next line. At present, we see indistinctly, as in a mirror, but then face to face. Some translations I like better. It says something like, "At present, we see indistinctly, or we see as through a glass darkly." And I keep thinking of that. I think of that we can see now very, very, very poorly. We see what the real world is through a dark glass. If you've tried to look through a window at night when there's not much light on the other side, and you're trying to see in there, when you're looking in, or there's not much light outside when you're trying to look outside, it's really hard to do that. But when you get face to face with somebody, you can see them very well. And like these are statements. There's so much stuff that comes out of this passage. We could read that list of things that it does: patience, kind, jealous, not pompous, or not jealous, not pompous, not inflated, not rude, does not seek interest. We could do a podcast on each one of those little things. This is the measuring stick. This is where it starts. This is the thing you need to focus on. And when you're in these discussions with people that you love, you need to ask yourself, am I being patient? Am I being kind? Am I being jealous? Am I being pompous? Am I being inflated? Am I being rude? Am I seeking my own interests? Am I being quick-tempered? Am I brooding over injury? We all get hurt. How long do you hold it? Do you rejoice over wrongdoing, or do you rejoice with the truth? Do you believe all things, bear all things, hope all things, endure all things? That's the measuring stick. That's what you need to ask. And it's really, really hard. That's the sacrificial love. Lent is coming, and it ends with Holy Week. And Holy Week ends with Good Friday and the crucifixion. That's what love looks like. So when you are called to love, you are called to do that. Death to self, giving yourself to the other. It's a gift. It's a gift that you give. And Eros is a part of getting you there, and it's a very important part. The right alignment with Eros points you to ways where you will manifest agape. If you look at the people who have given their lives for others, sometimes it's through philia, sometimes it's through a love of duty, for example. But oftentimes it's for it's a love for another. And oftentimes it's male, female. So it's an Eros thing that's driving people. People will do that. They will give everything. And the Eros drives the Agape. So when Valentine's Day comes around on Saturday, know that you can choose love. You can choose Agape. You can choose to direct yourself into willing the good of the other as other. And if you do so, you might actually be struck by the gift of Eros, a human spark that is a taste of our desire for the ultimate fulfillment of all our desires, our return to God. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Remember to enjoy the chocolates, seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.